So who wants more flow in their life? Yeah, who doesn't want more flow in their life, right? So for the sake of time, I am going to invite us to step out of time and into the present moment, right? And that will allow us to get the most of our time, interestingly enough. That's one of the ways to master time. And the practical application of mastering time is usually what you want to do in your life. Balance your life, productivity, creativity, your work, your business, whatever. But one of the ways to master time is to actually get out of time, right? To slow time down. Raise your hand if you've had the experience of being in the flow and it seems like time was just like doing this weird, wacky thing where it's like you either contracted it, you expanded it, you're like, whoa, how did this happen? Right? That's experiencing another dimension of your consciousness. And so I'm going to take a few moments here to guide us deeper into the moment so that we actually have more time. And in fact, that's something that I highly recommend as a strategy, if you will, in your own life and in your own business, is to master time. One of the quotes I heard several years ago that was really symbolic and really invited me into a deeper level of my consciousness was, I think, by Abraham Lincoln. He said, if I had an hour to chop down a tree, I'd spend 45 minutes sharpening my axe. And that became a great metaphor for me. To you tree lovers out there, sorry for the quote. my name actually means tree in Hebrew too, BTW. So, and what that quote really points to is the unfathomable leverage, efficiency, productivity, creativity that comes from sharpening your axe. Right? And so sharpening your axe would be investing your time, your energy, your attention, which is one of your most precious assets. We talk about like time is currency, you know, time is money. I would take it a step further, especially with the times that we're living in, especially with this crowd. I would say what's more precious than time is presence, is attention, right? Because isn't that where we actually feel and experience the depth and quality of our life, is the quality and depth to which we can viscerally experience and feel the moment. And that's a function of your attention. So your attention is like your life force. It's your consciousness. That's the quan. That's the gold. That's the source. So the more of your attention you have here today, now, in this moment, the more you will be able to extract, experience, and receive whatever you're meant to receive out of this. So just for fun, raise your hand. I'm going to challenge you guys here. Just raise your hand if you feel like you're fully present right now. Okay, good. I appreciate that. I appreciate that response, because that's a bold statement to make, to say I'm completely present. Right? You're here physically, but then you have mental space, and even if you're not in your mind in the past or the future, you could be in the past and the future occupying space energetically. That's a more subtle level of awareness, and actually one that's very helpful to become familiar with. It's like, where is your attention flowing right now? Because the more of your attention you have occupying the present, the more you are in sync with the universe, in sync with the flow, and in the flow of life, in the flow of your life, is the unfoldment and the manifestation of all of your goals, dreams, desires, and intentions happening on a moment-to-moment basis. So, let's see if we can get here more. So let's take a deep breath together, like inhale. And just drop into the moment. If it took us 20 minutes to get into the moment and only had 5 minutes, those would be the best 5 minutes of your life. All right? So just let go of any of your thoughts about the past, thoughts about the future, any of your to-do list. Just let that effortlessly melt, effortlessly drop into the presence of your being. And if you feel any of your attention, any of your energy that's anticipating the future, dwelling in the past, you don't have to know how, just have the intention to allow more of your attention to just melt into this moment. Raise your hand if you feel more here now than you did a few seconds ago. Okay, awesome. Awesome. Any relationships that you have, right? Anyone that you feel connected to that's not even in this room, this is another subtle level of awareness, but it can serve you very well. If you can feel, is anyone in your space right now that's not in this room? Raise your hand. Okay, awesome. These little things are actually very, very useful when it comes to flow and when it comes to maximizing your potential and the expression of your gifts in the world. To just be aware of your own energy and being able to manage it and then being able to maximize it, right? So your attention, your presence is everything. So now I'd like to invite you to let go of everything that you know. That's easy, right? Just drop it like it's hot. Let go of everything that you know, at least for the time that we're here together. We've had a fantastic morning. We've had heart openings. We've had expansion. We've had mind openings. We've had lots of great knowledge, but I want you to let go of everything that you know. And for those of you who know me, I would say, let go of everything that you know about me, right? These things, when we're talking about pulling your energy from the past, pulling your energy from the future, creates space, expands your consciousness. Pulling your attention from the past or the future, it creates space. Another thing that creates space is letting go of knowledge. Even sacred knowledge, even amazing, beneficial, your jam kind of knowledge, when you let that go, you actually create more space. And the letting go of what you know, and this is actually probably very relevant for the people in this room and for the planet, really. One of the themes that has come up at varying levels to varying degrees in my work with people, in speaking and working with high-performing leaders, and many of them, most of them women, is trust. Trust, right? And so letting go of things that don't serve you, letting go of things that are negative, that generally registers in our consciousness, in our mind, in our being as something obvious to work towards letting go. Does that make sense? But letting go of things that are amazing, that could be even just as challenging, if not more challenging, because it doesn't necessarily make sense to your brain. Like, why would I want to let go of the things that are serving me? But you see, when you're letting go of something, anything that's actually relevant, that's truly authentically relevant to your life, does not go away. You don't actually lose it. But you might have the experience psychologically and then emotionally that you're actually losing it. Do you see what I'm saying? And so if you take the step of letting go of everything that you know, even the things that are positive to you, that is the move into trust, right? And it's the move into deeper knowing, because when we get beyond the identity, the one that knows, like I know, I have the wisdom of my experiences, my past, I know things about me, about the world, all of these things that are assets to us. When you let go of that, what opens up is a deeper connection to your inner knowing. So you're not actually left hanging dry, but sometimes the part of us that's holding on feels unstable, feels uncertain, feels out of control. Can anybody relate to that? Even just can everybody relate to that? Okay, thank you. Even in the simplest of moments, I've been sitting with people sometimes, and I might say something, and just like trying to understand something or not understanding something. What is that threshold for you? What is that edge? What is that situation? What is that moment where you get to that moment and you start to feel anxious, you start to feel overwhelmed, you start to feel out of control? Because that moment, as scary as it can be, which then our inclination is to try to grab on, try to hang on to what it is that we know, that moment is actually like the doorway into the flow. And so embracing the unknown, becoming friends with the unknown, if I can go a little further, falling in love with the unknown, making love to the unknown, is where a tremendous wellspring of power and resources is awaiting you. You guys following me? You feeling me? You picking up what I'm putting down? Yeah? So, does anyone want to say anything about that or have a question about that or want to share like what that looks like for them in terms of not knowing? I want to hear from someone. What's your experience with knowing and not knowing? Like, I don't know. How does that feel to you? Scary? Yes, back there?
I know something. I have no, sorry. When I know something for real, I feel it in my body and there's no question about it. It's just like, this is what I'm doing. And I have no doubts. And when I'm not sure, I'm kind of like, not really sure, hemming and hawing. And then I know it's like not the time to make a decision about something. But when I know it, I actually feel it physically and on an energetic level.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you. So before I say more about trust, this might be another trick question here. Raise your hand if to any degree you're being invited to trust more in your life. All right. That's pretty much everybody. That's why I threw the to any degree part in there. You know, so like, oh yeah, no, I completely trust. No. Do you know what complete trust looks like? You know, we talk about, she's like, no. Actually, I don't. I'm glad this is coming out because when I speak around the world about flow, right, that's been one of the things that has been my jam for a while. And I reflect upon my own journey and the things that have been most beneficial or have contributed the most to my flowability. There's a word. Sort of flow dictionary. I would say that, and I don't always think to mention this, that's why I'm glad it's coming up, is that this idea of surrender, you know that easy thing to do? Oh yeah, just surrender, just let go. You just gotta let go. You know, like, yeah, but how? Just let go, right? Well, let go of the how. Well, how do I let go of that? Right? He's like running around in this loop until eventually maybe you give up. And then the doorway of surrender opens, the heavens open. And I'm joking, but I'm not when I say that the thing that has probably, it's in the top 5 for sure, has contributed the most to my flowability in my life, it is surrender. It is facing death, and I say that metaphorically, right? Facing death and dying and resurrecting and rebirthing so many times that it's like breathing now, right? And so it's like that point of death is the point of surrender. And sometimes it's the point where you're clinging, clamoring, holding on with everything you've got, right? And for most people, I would say most of the time, we get forced to surrender. That's where we kind of are in the evolution of our humanity. But as we evolve, and especially those of you in this room, there's this move happening where we're starting to voluntarily surrender instead of getting our ass kicked. And then go, okay, I have to surrender now because I have no more answers. I can't figure it out. I am out of options. But see, that's really surrender. It's not letting go of your goals, your intentions, the things that are sincerely in alignment with you and important to you. It's letting go of control. And really, it's letting go of the I, because the I is the one that controls. The I part of us, our identity, it's the knower. It's our limited spectrum of perception and awareness, and that's like our toolbox. We go, okay, I can perceive, I can see, this is what I need, and it is an asset, right? I'm not saying that it's not, but what happens is that when we overly rely on that particular asset, and then we draw our sense of certainty, capability, confidence from what we know, then when the flow is trying to open up, or when we're going to another level, or when we're in a moment and we can't figure it out, that's what I mean when I say like the identity is like, okay, well, if I don't do this, it's not going to happen, you know, or I'm going to lose something. It's perceiving inaccurately, and that's why it's holding on. But at that same moment, that's the opportunity to surrender. And so what I've noticed about surrender is it is doable, all right? And if you keep surrendering over and over, it's like they say leap and the net will appear, right? You guys leapt before? I know you guys have. And you're like, okay, whew, I didn't die. Right? And you leap again, whew, I didn't die. What I've noticed that happens over time, and I actually encourage this, at your own pace. I don't know your pace. I say this with compassion, but with intensity, is that eventually you keep leaping and you no longer wait for the net to appear. You're just flying. And that's like living in a perpetual state of surrender. Can you feel that? Does that sound awesome and scary at the same time, or just scary, or a little bit of both? Right? That's something that I feel blessed to experience. And so much so that I don't even realize that that is my experience, usually until someone reflects it back to me. Like the other day, I was in a situation and my friend was like, wow, you're so calm. And she said, you have so much faith. And I literally had to like look at myself from her point of view. I said, oh, I could see why you're saying this is faith. But actually, I'm not exercising faith. Exercise of faith is tremendous. It's powerful. But the exercise is the experience of, and then the experience of, right? And so it's the part of us that's feeling out of control, and then we let go, and then that's the exercise of faith. And then we open, we deepen. And I do experience that sometimes. But oftentimes, I don't even feel like it's faith because I've committed myself. I've surrendered myself to that which exists beyond myself and allowed the divine to move through me, as me, and to use me. You guys feeling me on that? Yeah? So how do you build trust? All right? Trust is necessary for many things. It's definitely necessary for flow. It's definitely necessary to be highly activated and active within your own intuition. But the interesting thing I've noticed about trust as well is that I've seen a connection between trust and self-worth. Yeah, I just kind of like revelation. And what I noticed is that the more you trust yourself, not just the knower, not just the information you have that you know about yourself, the story of yourself, but your soul. When you trust your soul, even if you have to cross that threshold with your courage and move into trust, and you actually trust your soul, and you act on that, which is a demonstration, it's an act of self-love. So when we talk about, and I talk about things like self-love and self-worth and these types of things, like how do we build this stuff? How do we remember? How do we uncover? How do we strip away? There's many angles to that, but one of the most unique ones that I've seen that has resulted in more self-worth is actually acting on your intuition. Do you guys get the connection there? Because when you don't and you act and you only build trust, because you can build trust in what you know, right? That's still going to be a sense and a sensation of power, right? Sensation of empowerment. When you only build trust on that which you can perceive and that which you know, then when you make decisions from that place, it's going to be lurking in the background sometimes of your consciousness. Ever so faintly, you're going to be kind of like a chess player, always trying to make the right move and keep yourself spaced, which is not trust, is what I'm saying. So I've noticed that trust, there's a distinction right there. What are you building trust in? Because we're all trusting in something. But if you want to experience more flow, and I just expanded this to include more self-worth, there's something that happens. When I say self-worth, it's like there's a respect, there's a solidness, there's an unshakableness to the trust that comes from respecting yourself enough, loving yourself enough to be in that space where if it came down to it, I'm just going to exaggerate this for a moment. If it came down to it, between betraying your soul, the voice of your soul, your own authentic, unique voice, if it came down to betraying that or the world, you'd be like, sorry, world. Feel that. That type of trust is transcendent of this plane. And what is revealed in that space actually has you be able to be more in this plane. It's really interesting. The type of trust, the type of safety that is so transcendent of this world actually enables you to be more inclusive of the world. And that's starting to move into this space of oneness. Does anybody have any questions before I go further down? the current rabbit hole? Questions, thoughts? Because my intention is to be of service to you, the highest level of service, right? And I'm sharing information, but this really, if you're listening and you're not only listening with your brain or your mind, if you're listening with your heart, then I can actually transmit this through my being, through frequency, much faster than anything that I'm saying. And especially if you don't need to understand. If you want to understand, that's okay. If you desire to understand, that's okay, because wanting to understand, desiring to understand something is actually still flow. But when we need to understand something, we're actually in our head, and that's the identity. We're in fear. So if the more of that you can let go of, the easier it'll be to understand, and more importantly than understand, activate, awaken whatever is meant to be awoken inside you. Yes.
So this is, I think, a very basic question, but I keep trying to plug in what you're saying to my day-to-day life.
Yes.
And I can sense that I'm like picking up a whole bunch of what you're putting down, but I'm trying to like fit it into this one moment that I experience a lot, which is where I get into a panic when creating stuff in my business.
Uh-huh.
And it's like everywhere outside of that moment, I know how to access flow,
Uh-huh.
but there's this panic that overtakes, and I just...
Can you give me a specific scenario in your business? Like, are you...
Yeah, a solid like moment of scarcity, of like, shit, I need to bring in money right now, real quick.
Uh-huh.
Is that enough clarity?
Yeah, that's good.
Fuck, I need money now.
Well, the first thing that comes to me is that to see what's actually creating the panic. Because panic it's like a physiological, emotional, energetic experience, right? And it's not the money or the need for the money that's creating the panic. It's that you're in a reality, you're in a perception, and you have energy in it that is something that's actually not true. It feels true, but I'm saying it literally is not true in the way that you're saying it. Like, I need to make money right now. That's actually not the truth. And I'm saying that the mistruth of that and the frequency of that thought, of that idea, because that's what you're trying to navigate through. It's like, oh, well, since that's true, then everything that you're doing, asking, even if you're trying to unpanic yourself or relax yourself, you're doing it within the matrix of your original statement, which is already off. That's what's creating the instability. And in fact, that's actually what's making you panic. Like, that statement is not true if you look at it. You're saying that from only what you can see. And if only what you could see was true, then you should panic. Do you know what I'm saying? But that's the point, is that that's only what you can see. Am I making sense?
Solid, yeah.
Yeah, so that's one way you can kind of deconstruct that, right, and release the panic, because that's what's generating it in the first place. I need to make money right now. That's a feeling that you're having and a thought. And you have a thought and a feeling and a thought and a feeling. And then now everything that you're seeing it through that. And so your strategies, your ideas, your actions, everything is in the vibration of that. You see what I'm saying? And so naturally within that matrix, your body's going to have to be like, okay, we got to figure it out because we need to make money right now. It's like, is that true? You'd love to. See how much that's already lighter. But that you need to, and you need to right now, is coming from a narrow band of your perception, and that's what makes it feel so tight. So if you can move in, and this is where the words "I don't know" actually become power words. At other times when you say "I don't know" when you actually do, you're actually full of shit, right? So it's like in one camp, it's like, don't say "I don't know" when you actually know. Right? But in another sense, don't say that you know when you actually don't. Right? So this is one of those instances. You don't actually know. And if you can rest in that and not resist that, then a lot of the tension will immediately dissipate. Now, you're still standing in the unknown, but the only part of us that's afraid in the unknown is the one who needs to know and who's saying, I know. You're actually the one who needs to know that doesn't know is saying, but hey, I do know. Like, look, I can see. This is how much money I have in my bank account. This is what's going on in my business. I know that this is what I need. And it's not even the desire. It's not the words. everything is consciousness. Everything is energy. The word need is how you position yourself in your desire. So when you're in the consciousness of need, then you can't escape that. You see what I'm saying? And so it's not to say, oh, never mind, you don't want the money. Forget about the money. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you're in the vibration of lack, trying to get yourself out of it. And that's a much longer route. And it'll take a lot more effort. And it'll take a lot more time. Why? Because you're having to navigate through your own creation, essentially. Does that make sense? I can break it down a little further. You guys follow me on that? Yeah. So does that help? Yeah. Awesome. Yes?
So I guess to piggyback off of that, what should she be saying then? If it's like, okay, well, we see, let's say, rent's due or whatever's due on this date, it costs this much. Oh. Okay. So you see you need this, or clear correct. There's a desire, you have to pay something.
Right.
Okay?
You got bills. Yeah.
You have to pay something. And then there's this much in your account, or however, and it
Right.
doesn't match what has to be paid, or whatever.
Right,
the pay,
right.
The pay part. What should she do then at that point, instead of saying, okay, well, I don't need it, I don't want to be in this vibration of needing? How do we expand that vision that you said it's narrow vision? How do we expand it and still at the same time do what we need
Sure.
to do to pay that?
Right. Well, the more abstract answer would be let go, right? But how do you do that? Oh, just let go. Especially when you really need money, just surrender. Like, oh, I'm surrendered. Oh, fuck, I'm surrendered. Oh, shit. Bill collectors are going to be calling. But another access point is truth. Truth has a strength to it. We, meaning our perception, the perceiver doesn't always like truth because it's like, oh, this is scary, this is painful. But truth also can expand you back into your power. And that's why I said, and one way to use truth in a situation like this is to just question what you're saying. You know, you might need to, if you're really overwhelmed, you might need just like step one, breathe, right? Your mind's going, I don't have the time to breathe. But going back to the whole chopping down the tree, sharpen your axe, and if I could land this one point, this would be epic. If you guys get this, like, when you're already crunched for time and you're in your mind, you create more time. Does that make sense? When you're in your mind and you're in the energy of need, because I said it's the frequency, you actually lengthen your process. It takes longer. So you do have time. And I sometimes have to negotiate with my clients, because they're out there, world changers. They got so many things moving on. I had a guy one time, I'll give you an example. And if you need any more on this, I'll continue with it. One of my clients owns a law firm, and we had a session at 10 a.m., and he's like, Oren, putting out fires in the office, something urgent happened. Can we reschedule our session till this afternoon? I said, yes. Okay, fine. What time? He said, 2 o'clock. I called him at 2 o'clock, and he was like, man, I'm still behind the 8 ball. So he has strong desire. He's putting out fires, right? He's trying to get things back in order. And he's like, I'm already behind on time. So let's just for sake of understanding, he's like on a timeline. I'm already behind on time, so I can't take the time into our session. And he said, can we reschedule? And I said, no. That's what he pays me for. I'm like, no, we're not going to reschedule. And he's like, what? And I was like, I think I called him bro. I was like, bro. It's one of my elders, but I was like, bro. I said, give me 3 minutes. Do you have 3 minutes? This is me doing like some energetic jujitsu with him, right? Because I can see that he can't see. Because that's what happens when you're stuck in time and your being's in a state of anxiousness. It's like your body's trying to catch up to your spirit, which is already in the flow. And your body goes, oh, but we're moving faster, so we're actually catching up. But guess what? When your body's moving faster, because you're in your mind, you're actually wasting time. Let that one sink in. This is one of like the biggest entrepreneurial life secrets I've discovered is this dynamic where slowing down speeds you up. Few people know this one. It's epic. Like when you realize, I had that revelation so many times. I'm like, this is crazy. It's like a joke. And it's so magical when you get on the other side of it. But for me, that happens so many times. I'm like, I get it now. So much to the point, I'm going to finish the lawyer story. I'm tracking everything here, right? So much to the point that when I'm in an urgent situation now, time stops. The more urgent it is, the more I'm in the moment. Like my aunt was effectively dying in front of me. This was about a year ago. She was having a stroke, right? Talk about urgent situation. You're like, I got to pay bills. I'm like, my aunt's dying, all right? Probably a little bit more urgent. But the thing is that the more present you are, the more creative capacity, the more you can respond and be responsible, the more you can perceive, the more you have more of your resources available. So I'm really trying to not persuade you, but just paint this picture of why you would want to invest in things that expand your consciousness, that slow you down, that actually give you more time and capability. So going back to the story with my client, I said 3 minutes. I was kind of matching his vibration because he's like, Oren, we can't do this. I was like, dude, breathe. I was like, this is my 3 minutes now, all right? He's like, okay, fair enough. I'm like, step one, let's take 20 seconds, just breathe it out. He's like, okay, cool. All right, I was like, what's going on? He's like, major catastrophe going on, cascade of events and whatnot. And he said, that's why I want to reschedule the session. I said, what if, wink, wink. I said, what if we invested an hour, because our sessions were an hour. I said, what if we invested an hour and it wound up saving you 10 hours? Would that make sense? Would that be a good investment of your time? And he's like, well, yeah. See, speaking to his logic, right? Because he's in his logic. I'm like, would that make sense? I had a little bit of leverage with him because I'd worked with him before, so he trusts me, right? And so I said, well, that's the case. I'm like, I don't even know what's going on in your office, like literally, but I'm, intuitive like that. And I'm like, I can feel like you're wasting time. I know you don't think you're wasting time because you're stuck in time. Anyway, I basically took him back. Do you guys want to tell you what happened? Because I think this might be useful. I took him back to the moment in time where he perceived the dominoes started falling down, like the things started going bad. And I was like, what do you see in that moment? He's like, well, I told my assistant this, and then she went ahead and did this, and it went here, ping, 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 ping. So I'm like, so that was his problem-solving trajectory based upon his perception. And I was like, slow down, okay? What did you not see in that same moment? What do you not? So you said to your assistant, this is like logical, and this is actually a great thing if those of you who have businesses, and are busy. This is a great awareness and a great thing, leadership ability. And I said, okay, so she said she understood you, right? She repeated back, okay, got it. She has the skill, second checkpoint. I'm like, but what occurred inside her? How did what you said land inside her? Do you see anything? Get out of judgment, get out of your mind, get out of, what do you see? And basically, I was inviting him deeper into his own intuition, which when we're in our intuition, we have a sixth sense. Like we can see the invisible realm once again. But he couldn't see that because he was putting his power in whatever project he was working on, just like we put our power in money. And that's one of the things that short circuits our intuition. Because when you put your power in that, then you don't see as clearly. Does that make sense? Anyway, so I took him back to that moment, and he was like, oh, I see what happened with her. He's like, yeah. Anyway, long story short, he solved the problem. The whole problem, and more. And he probably gained 40 hours, but meanwhile, in his mind, he didn't have an hour to sit down for our session. He didn't think he had an hour. So I'm connecting all this back to, the example of that she brought up is that it's okay to have the thought, but as soon as you believe that what you're perceiving is true, then you're starting to create. And then as soon as you add passion into it, that's your spiritual life force. That's the energy that you breathe life into ideas, to beliefs, to perceptions. Then now you're in it. You're in it. You're knee deep in it then. And everything you're seeing is from it. So all of your problem solving is going to be from that. So I'm saying all that to say, to go back to the simple tree analogy, that anything that you do to invest more time in slowing down and connecting is going to benefit you. And if you start to infiltrate that more and more into your decision-making processes, then that's how you really start to integrate it more into your life, and take down the different exceptions that you might have. I'm like, oh, well, I'll do this over here, but when it comes to my business, maybe not so much. It's these little exceptions that we make that wind up biting us in the ass and affecting us some way. The same way when we don't listen to the whispers of our soul. Start to treat the whispers of your soul, the little things, the same way you would the big things, and your life will change, 100%. People ask me sometimes, how's your life and your transitions and your transformation have this, it seems like there's a grace to it. That's because I choose to listen sooner than later. Anybody can make that choice. Anybody can make that choice. All right, any other questions? Just getting warmed up here. Yes?
Just wondering if by being aware, does that mean that you can short circuit that process?
Which process you're describing?
Getting into that bad sort of perception.
Uh-huh.
It's stuck.
Uh-huh.
But if you become more aware of it, can you sort of stop it in its tracks?
You can, depending on if you're emotionally invested in it or not. Which you're emotionally invested means you're mentally invested, actually. So yeah, that is an option. It's not the option that probably most people experience most of the time. Like if you have an awareness that something's out of sync, it's out of alignment, then you can choose in that moment to let go of the energy that you had vested in whatever you were perceiving. But the fight is the fight of the ego. It's the fight of the identity. It's going, no, but I know. So in theory, and this is why I speak a fair amount about things like letting go and about surrender, but sometimes it's like there seems to be an impracticality around it simply because of like, well, how do I do that? But more importantly, because we don't want to. That's it. So even with resistance, like any form of resistance, let's say you're experiencing that as anger or frustration or anxiety, one of the things that I realize about resistance is that the overwhelmingness of it, the difficulty of it, the pain of it is not actually just the resistance. It's often the next layer on top of it, which is the resistance to the resistance. And that could come in the form of fear, or it could come in the form of judgment. But fear and judgment are strong resistance. And so we can't even get an accurate read of how painful the resistance is or how painful the pain is because we're resisting the resistance. Going back to what I said on the couch about the flow, when Joe asked about, times when you're out of the flow and what you do to get back in the flow, one of the things that helps me get back in the flow is I don't have resistance thoughts like, what happened to me? I should be in the flow. What's wrong with me? Just things we might be thinking subconsciously, like, oh my gosh, I'm in the anti-flow, or, whatever. And so it collapses time in getting back into the flow because, yes, if I'm out of the flow, there's a form of resistance, but now there's not a story of resistance on top of the resistance. And that's why if you really, not positive thinking, but if you really continue to have revelations and start to see that resistance as gold, you start to see it as that your truth trying to emerge, if you start to relate to your resistance differently, then you'll experience your resistance differently. And you might even start liking it. And guess what? And you might even start loving it. And guess what happens with things you fall in love with? They come into harmony with you, and they support you, and they become your friend. They become your ally. They become on your team. So I think that's a really good point there. Does that make sense, you guys? There's the resistance, and then there's the resistance to the resistance, which is usually judgment, fear. I shouldn't be doing this. This shouldn't be happening. How could this be happening? Some story that we're making up on top of just the simplicity of whatever event that we're in. You guys here? You feeling me? Yeah? All right, good. I love questions. I could go on in multiple directions. Yes?
Hello. Hiya. Do you have any suggestions for daily rituals or just something that we can do to be more present? Anything daily that we can start doing more of? Meditation, I'm working on that one.
Yes.
Still falling asleep. I'm trying. So any ideas of daily rituals that we can do to become more present, more in flow,
Sure.
let go of resistance and stuff like that?
Yes. I don't know what they are, though. I'm kidding. No, really. I mean, they just come. Well, see, that I'm going to make a distinction here because when people ask me what I do, but they're wanting to know what they could do, it's not always applicable. No, do you know what I'm saying? Sometimes it is, but a lot of times, like when I say what I do, people are like, huh? Like, no, but what do you do? And I'm like, but that is what I do. And they're like, no, but this is, what is it? I'm like, so anyway. So meditation is great. This sounds funny. Start your day in the present. Start your day in the present. So meditation is one thing that can help with that, right? That creates a space. Maybe create a to-be list instead of just a to-do list, right? Because if you create a to-be list, then you're going right to the source, because anything that you're going to do, really, ultimately, even though they're tasks and things, they're still only going to be you experiencing those things, and ultimately the quality and experience of your life is going to come down to who you're being and how you're experiencing that. So if you make a to-be list and you give your attention to that at the beginning of the day, then now you're giving intention to things that are in alignment with flow, right? Because if you're like, ooh, I want to be, magnetic and radiant and powerful, and those move through you in a way that's authentic, that feels life-giving, and you're like, yes, that's who I want to be today. That's how I want to be. That's who I want to be. Then you're already generating flow. The flow part is the resonance in the idea. So if you say, I want to be magnetic, and that starts to fill you up, it's not in the future now, it's in the now. Right? And so then you may not spend your whole day chasing the present moment, because it's chasing you all day, basically, unless you're in the moment. So start your day in the moment. Do something that lights you up. Don't wait until the future. For me, if I get up in the morning, and this doesn't happen very often, but if I'm in thought immediately, then I know I'm already in time. Unless it's inspired thought or thought that's relevant to that moment. If I get into thought that's not relevant to the moment, then I act accordingly. And that might be meditate, that might be slow down. But even if I'm not in thought, if I feel my body is jumping out ahead of me, this might be a little bit more subtle awareness, right? Your body meaning your energy body, right? And how do you know your energy body's jumping out into time? You're anxious. You might not be thinking, which is obvious recognition of anxiousness. Like, oh, I'm thinking about my schedule, I'm thinking about this. But even if you're not thinking, if your energy body's jumped out into the future, it manifests as anxiousness. That's how it feels to me. Like if I get up and I'm like, it's almost like your physical body is trying to catch up into the flow, right? And it thinks it's, doing amazing because I'm moving fast. But it's like, but if you're already moving fast, it means that you're in mental consciousness and you're actually moving slower now. But if you slow down, then it's like clink, 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 clink. It's literally like that. It goes, that's the noise I hear anyway. It's like clink, 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 clink. And then boom, now you're present and you're in step and you can actually move much faster now because the circuits are open and you're being driven by that spiritual energy and letting it be the driver and your body's just jumping on board with it. Does that make sense, guys? All right. Yes?
Can you talk about prayer? And so I find myself praying throughout the day.
Uh-huh.
Like I'll pray to start my day, start the work that I'm doing. I pray before I eat and stuff. And the more I do that, I realize too I'm literally praying throughout the day.
Yes.
Just speaking to source and calling that in. So it's like I feel like I'm gaining this awareness that it's not a separate thing in my lifestyle. And so I think my question is, I do have this desire to know what your prayer life is and how that is. But it's also, just it could even be just about your journey of how you've integrated prayer and really utilize it in your business.
Okay, great question. So prayer is an interesting one for me because I feel like I'm living in prayer most of the time, right? And at this point, I have to go back a couple of chapters to be more actively doing what you did. But at this point, I'm sure there's several times throughout the day that I'm in prayer without really knowing it, because it's become part of my flow, if that makes any sense. That's why it's hard to tell sometimes, because a conscious ritual is different. It's like, I'm going to sit down and meditate. It's like, oh, I'm meditating now. Like, people ask me if I meditate. I'm like, well, yes. Well, not really, but yes, I do, because I'm meditating throughout the day. In fact, I'm in a meditative state right now. Even if I'm talking really, really fast, if you put my brain waves on an EEG, I'm actually in a meditative state. Now, my body's a little bit hyper, so it's a little bit, trying to sink in, but I'm in a meditative state. So the thing about prayer, too, is that's key is receptivity, receiving. Because receiving is what opens you up to experience the manifestation, the revelation of the prayer. And sometimes if we pray in a way that we're seeking too much, or we're trying to get something, and then we're winding up looking around to see if our prayers are being answered, then it could appear that they're not being answered when they actually are. Because when you're in the flow, then you're in receptivity. You're in a state of receiving. And that's no different than like you're trying to control anything else. Even like when you're trying to find an answer to a question, and when you're trying, you're not in a state of receptivity, and you actually wind up blocking the very thing that you asked for, or in this case, prayed for. So receiving is a big thing that I've noticed too. Anybody got, some room to expand in their ability to receive? Any givers out there? Yeah. So who was it earlier who was saying, ask. Like, that's one of the things in my relationship, specifically with women. I'm like, man, you guys are working too hard. And I'm not talking about what you're doing, like the number of hours. I'm just talking about like it's one thing to move within the inspiration and within your capacity and capability and your knowledge, moving towards what you want. But what really takes that to another level is to simultaneously be in a state of receptivity, right? And this is something that I've noticed that I guess it's part of our own evolution. And even with masculine and feminine energy, it's like, we're building up our masculine capacity, into more of a divine sort of masculine energy that's a more pure masculine energy that's not deriving from the identity or the ego, right? And same thing, we're building up our capacity, and the feminine's rising. We all know that. And what's also happening, and this is how I experience my flow, is the fusion of the two. It's not one or the other. In fact, they only get separated in our minds. It's like masculine or feminine, will or surrender, right? Oftentimes we compartmentalize those spaces because that's the way we can best navigate them. But what's happening is they really are actually in perfect harmony. And that might be awakening just to hear that. They really are in perfect harmony. So if there was a sweet spot, if there was like an epic, what is the ultra high performance zone in life and business? If I was going to describe it, it would be to have clarity and precision of intention and decision within your goals, dreams, desires, right? That's that focused, masculine, creative energy, while simultaneously being completely open, surrendered, receptive to all of life. Does that not feel sweet? Yeah. You guys feel that? Yeah. That's what's up right there. And that's possible. And you guys are experiencing that to varying degrees. But that is possible. There's no disparity between the two of those energies. There's no confusion. The only part of us that gets confused is the knower. Because it's like, but wait a minute. When I'm in masculine energy, I know that but this is what I know, and this is what I'm doing. But then it's like, then you cut off to some degree this vast, magnetic, crazy, powerful feminine energy of receptivity that could be flowing through the focus into manifestation. That's really probably how it's more purely designed to go. And I understand in the evolution of consciousness, in the evolution of business, in the evolution of feminine energy, because of imbalances, there's been a move to reawaken the feminine, and I don't say this to anyone's fault, because I understand how it's happening this way. I would like to accelerate it a little bit, if that's cool. But there's this compensating energy. It's almost like you swing from one end of the pendulum all the way to the other end, and then so there's a lot of space for growth that's manifesting as inefficiencies and working too hard. That's why I tell my clients sometimes, like, you're working too hard, trust me. You know, and I know sometimes, especially if I have a personal relationship with them, I know in little moments where they want something, they have the intention, they're not actually inspired to do it. I feel the inspiration move through me as the universe, as the masculine, to try to deliver it, and they're on autopilot, and they're like, they already got it, and I'm like, wow, I literally can feel. If anybody wants to connect with me, if you want me to get a read, I can feel people's levels of receiving. I can feel it in my body. I can feel it in my body. I feel it when I touch someone. And so the feminine, this receptivity is huge. Not instead of the masculine, in partnership, in perfect harmony with the masculine. And that's the thing that I see even with, you know, people who are very much resting in their feminine. You guys are working too hard. Are you down for some more grace, some more ease? Raise your hand. Give me a hallelujah, something. Amen. Yes. Church up in. Yeah, and that's where trust comes in. That's where intimacy comes back in. And I know, especially when it's women that I'm really close to, when I said I can feel the receiving and the level of receiving, it has to do with your heart and has to do with trust. Right? And it's interesting because even in the male-female dynamic, I said this to one of my friends one time. She was trying to call in the one, right? Call in her soulmate. And she was describing this person to me, and I immediately could feel like, oh, you're not going to find that guy as that you. And I said this to her. I didn't mean it literally. I was like, I'm actually the guy you're describing. I didn't mean that literally. Like, that'd have been smooth, though, right? I'm like, it's the manifestation. But what I meant was I could literally, not metaphysically, not even intuitively, literally, I'm like, I could see why you won't manifest that guy because he won't be inspired to be with you because right now I'm not inspired to be with you. Inspired, key word. Not that we're always going to be inspired, but inspired. Not obligated, not expectation, not like, oh, I'm going to be with a woman and I know how to treat a woman. I'm talking about moved. Come on, ladies, you want a guy who's moved to serve you, to adore you? Yes? Holler? Maybe? So for you to manifest somebody to be moved, like passion, like inspiration, like craziness, like one of my ex-girlfriends, I made a movie about her life and I showed it in a movie theater and I spent 3 months making it. It was insane, but I was moved. And I was moved not by my mind because that's not where we're moved. We're moved right here. But what allowed me to be moved to that degree, to be inspired to that degree through this language of love, of creating something amazing for her, was the space inside her that she was resting in. That's what creates the magnetic vortex where someone's moved. So if you're busy trying to do the thing that you want, right? And I'm trying. I'm not talking about your portion, of your contribution to your life, right? You use your assets, you know, your wisdom, your intellect, your knowledge. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about this whole other dimension of resource that's actually yours. It comes through your open heart and your trust and your surrender and your receptivity. If that goes up, it's like it lights up in existence and all the universe meets you in that vortex to go here, 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 here. So your I, when you say I, in fact, anytime you say the word I, you're either talking about I, like the story of you, or you're talking about I. And when you're talking about this I, it's actually we. There's no distinction. The I, the infinite self, the true self, is where we are connected to all of creation. And so when you're speaking from that I, it's not just my resources. The resources extend out in way more than you could ever perceive. So going back to men and women, I could talk a little bit more about that if you want. Women. So what's a guy like me? And when I say a guy like me, I don't mean it literally. I mean a guy like me who I just described, like who's moved or passionate to empower your mission, empower your gifts, and to serve. You're interested in hearing a little more about that, ladies? From a man's perspective, right? You got opportunity here, all right? So some of this stuff is going to be counterintuitive to the part of you that likes to be in control. Like the first example I gave you, it's like, oh, when I'm going after I learned to go after what I want, but then there's the times where you're going after it, where you're actually blocking it because life, your man, somebody is trying to do it for you, and you actually don't want to do it. So I'm talking about that zone. So there's one enlightening sort of awareness. Am I speaking too fast? Did I lose you?
You lost me.
Or you're like, do those men exist? What are you scratching your head about?
No, I'm pretty sure they exist, but I'm asking the question of, you were talking about something confusion or something. I missed that part.
Oh, what I said is that it might be confusing or counterintuitive, I think is what I said. Right? Because if you're in your mind, right, which is not bad, and you're only within, okay, my resources, if you're in that dimension, then you may not be able to perceive that which I'm talking about. Because in order to do so, you'd have to let go. But when you let go, the you that's letting go thinks there's nothing there. Right? That's why it's a surprise if it happens. That's why when we surrender, even though we might have to get our ass kicked to do it, suddenly it's like, oh, all the angels, and you're like, oh my gosh, look at all this amazing stuff that happened. Right? So here's another thing that might be paradoxical. And again, I'm not talking about me. I'm using myself as a reference point as a man in this next example. Oftentimes, I see women who like to control their emotions or hide them for one reason or another. Either they're afraid of them or they're in judgment, or they're like, I don't want to burden you with that, right? Or hide thoughts or things. For someone like me, that's actually more painful because I'm extremely sensitive and I can feel you anyway. And that's going back to my friend who I said, hey, you're going to have a little trouble manifesting that guy because you're sitting here with me right now. And she was like a little bit terrified that I could see right through her. But I'm like, but then how do you expect to manifest a guy that has the capacity and who is moved to support you, adore you, love you on that level when you're also simultaneously afraid of it? And that's okay. I was like, be compassionate with yourself, but don't be confused. She was having that experience with me, and I'm like, the same experience you're having with me, I'm like, the irony is I am that guy. I can see you right now. You think I can't see you, and I love you. And that's actually why I can see you. And I love you in spite of everything that I can see. You guys follow me on that? So I said there's an irony to it, but there's also a delightfulness to it because the more we surrender, even if we're forced to surrender, then you realize how beautiful you are, how supported you are, just exactly as you are. So, trust. Build trust in yourself. And that might involve crossing through your perception and your fear of loss or creating pain or experiencing pain. But to me, even if that's what it costs you, you'll start to respect yourself on such a deeper level, and then you'll just effortlessly command that from the universe. And you'll start to build more self-worth. It doesn't feel good not to trust. It doesn't feel good not to trust. So I think we have time for one last question. Yes?
How do you develop your psychic abilities? What are some training methods you would do?
Well, everything that I'm saying actually, bonus, just develops your psychic abilities because we're already extremely psychic. In fact, if you blow out the picture big enough, it's like, God, the divine, is omniscient. We're connected and made in the image and likeness of the Creator. So to develop them, it's more of an unlearning. It's more of a letting go. It's more of a stripping away. So trust develops it. Transparency develops it. The more transparent you're willing to be with yourself, the more transparent life becomes to you. And the thing that keeps us from being transparent with ourselves is usually judgment and fear. Judgment, when we judge something, we tend to hide it. But when we hide it, it diminishes our psychic capacity, and it also throws us into not trusting ourselves. So if you're willing to be radically loving and transparent to the contents of your own consciousness and bring the energy of compassion and love even into the darkness, it's not like you're going to develop your psychic abilities, you just won't be blocking them as much. Right? So the more you're willing to see even into the darkness, which is your own projection, right? Into the darkness and see and love those things, the more you'll see. That's what is affecting your level of psychic ability and capacity and the level of coherence and clarity. So people ask me sometimes, Oren, how do you know that? How can you see so much? It's because I'm willing to see. But the depth of willingness to see is the depth of love. Because when love replaces judgment and fear, then there's not it transmutes the energy in your consciousness. So that's love. There you go. Love's the master key. I can drop the mic on that one. All right. Thank you, guys.